Shabbat Shalom. Henry Ward Beecher was a 19th century clergyman, staunch abolitionist, and brother of author Harriet Beecher Stowe. He is credited with saying, "In this world, it is not what we take up, but what we give up that makes us rich." Give up. It's a strange expression, isn't it? When we hear it with our modern ears, it sounds like surrender, defeat, a laying down, even an admission of weakness. But of course, in the context of our Torah portion, as we begin the book of Leviticus this week, it means so much more. Sacrifice is a word we are hearing a lot these days. It comes from the Latin, meaning to make something holy, which isn't always how we hear it, is it? When we hear sacrifice, we think of doing without, of a painful compromise, of having to relinquish a part of ourselves, even if it's for the greater good. But the ancient approach to sacrifice, which takes center stage starting with this parsha and in this middle book of the Torah, provides an insight into the Jewish psyche that really is remarkable. For Jews, the notion of sacrifice is not objectionable at all. It's at the very heart of what it means to be a person created in the image of God and capable, exhorted even, to commune with that God in an ever-evolving relationship. And we have clear evidence for that in the word in Hebrew, which we translate usually as sacrifice. The word is korban. Its root is kuf resh vet, and it means to draw near. The ancient sacrificial system had as its most elemental spiritual purpose the goal of bringing the bearer of the offering closer to the divine presence. The great biblical commentator and teacher Nechama Leibowitz explained that the sacrifices were a positive means of promoting communion with the divine and a symbol and expression of a person's desire to purify himself and become reconciled with God. Rabbi Mordechai Finley of Congregation Or HaTorah here in Los Angeles teaches that when the ancient offerings were made, most especially when an animal was offered, the releasing of the life force within the animal was considered the most potent moment for connecting with the divine presence, right at the moment when the soul of the animal returned to its cosmic source. That must have been an awe-inspiring and humbling experience, no? To be that close to the liminal place between this world and the next, and to be touched by the mystery and fragility of life and death. So in that sense, the invitation from Jewish tradition to draw closer to the divine presence through our acts of sacrifice, of giving up, takes on an entirely different meaning at this moment in time. There are 5 different kinds of korbanot, of sacrificial offerings, that are enumerated as we begin the book of Leviticus. I'm going to list them, and we'll come back and revisit them in a couple of minutes. The first was called an olah, a burnt offering, a voluntary sacrifice with a high degree of sanctity. It was regarded as the standard offering. The entire animal, except for its hide, was burned on the altar. And if we needed more evidence of the notion of giving up, we need only to look at that word as well, because olah, with its root ayin, lamed, yud, has of course a direct relationship, it's the same word, as aliyah, ascent, that which we consider people to do when they move to the land of Israel, or even closer to home when they come up to the bima for an aliyah to the Torah, It's a spiritual ascent. So in that olah, this was giving up at its truest form. Second kind was called a mincha offering. Mincha with the notion of rest, relaxation, peace. Here, this was a meal offering. Mincha was a meal offering made of flour, oil, salt, and frankincense. It was partly burned on the altar and partly given to the priests to eat. The third kind, beautiful offering, was a zevach shlamim, a sacrifice of shalom or well-being. This was often a thanksgiving offering and an offering brought often to fulfill a vow that was made. Fourth kind was a chatat. Chet, we hear that word and we think sin, and these begin the expiatory offerings, the offerings of atonement. A chatat was a sin offering, an obligatory sacrifice offered to atone for an unintentional sin. And the final one is called an asham. It bears a distinctive coincidental relationship to the word in English ashamed. It looks exactly the same when transliterated. The asham was also a penalty offering. It was an obligatory offering of a ram, required chiefly of one who had misappropriated property, a particularly grievous sin in ancient times as well as now. So that had its own category of offering. So let's go back and think about each one of those offerings for the moment in which we find ourselves today. Obviously, I am talking from a place of voluntary confinement, in that we are here in Los Angeles sending messages of love and healing from our home. And I imagine that most anyone receiving this message is likely, similarly, and I pray, safe and healthy in your own homes as well. And so here we are in this moment of Shabbat, a forced Shabbat, but one with great potential. If we think about the notion of sacrifice in this time, particularly in relationship to the 5 kinds of sacrificial offerings, the korbanot, we sense already a feeling of irony. If a korban, in the Jewish sense, was intended to bring us closer, we are currently in a place of enforced separation, of distance, the likes of which most of us have never known or experienced. And yet there is great potential for rising up, for giving up from ourselves, from our souls. So let's review the 5 kinds of offerings and see, far from being simply an ancient code to which we cannot relate because, let's face it, we've had no temple at which to offer these kinds of sacrifices for well over 2,000 years. And yet, as is so often the case in Judaism, what our ancestors taught so long ago has extraordinary resonance for this moment. So let's think about the 5 kinds of sacrifices. What in this moment could be an olah, an offering up of something completely and entirely? What are you giving up completely and entirely at this time? What could be a mincha offering, an offering of food? An offering of food and sustenance to another person, to an organization that needs your help, or, absolutely similarly and relatedly, a mincha offering in a way that we modify our eating and drinking at this time. How are we doing that? With our choices of what we absolutely need to eat, what we need to buy, and what we can do without. What kind of mincha offering can we make at this time? What can be a zevach shlamim, an offering of peace and wholeness, an offering of thanksgiving and gratitude? Or could your Zevach Shlamim be something we do now to fulfill a vow we made recently, long ago, but that we've been unable to fulfill? To learn something new? To reach out to someone with whom we've lost contact or with whom we need to mend a fence? Or even just to clean out that closet or basement that we've vowed to do but haven't had the time? What kind of offering of thanksgiving or vow fulfillment can we make? And what could be a chatat or an asham offering? Something we do in this time that rectifies an earlier transgression. That is, some kind of sacrifice we make now as a way of making atonement. Likely, many of us have already in these last several weeks made a number of these sacrifices. But if we can think of what we are doing now in relation to what our ancestors did, we do what is also so necessary at this time. We come away from a feeling of isolation and separation and link ourselves to the holy and sacred work which our ancestors celebrated and did with full hearts and souls. So as we think about our Olah, our Mincha, our Zevach Shlamim, our Chatat, and our Asham offerings, we realize yet again that this moment is sacred and profound. We pray that the sacrifices that we are making are good and right and will ameliorate the suffering of others. We pray that in these acts of sacrifices, we ourselves will be made stronger, healthier, better, and more aware by what we give up at this time. Henry Ward Beecher, a man of erudition and deep spirituality, also reminded us that every tomorrow has two handles. We can take hold of it with the handle of anxiety or the handle of faith. Let us take today and tomorrow and the next day by the handle of faith. Let us steer ourselves with a calm rudder and a long view. Let's look toward a steady horizon with peace and wholeness. May our korbanot help us draw closer to the presence of God and the mystery of life in each breath. And may this time of separation, when we can't be close to one another, help us bridge the distance between ourselves and the divine. A very wise teacher who lives right here in my own house reminded me yesterday, there need be no social distancing between us and God. May faith and courage sustain us, and may our sacrifice, our korban, draw us closer in spirit to one another and to the tradition of our ancestors. Please, please be well and safe. Shabbat Shalom.